Welcome to Truth Behind History. The stories are real, the impact is lasting. Today, we're diving into a deception so brilliant, so bizarre, that it helped change the course of World War II by convincing the Nazis that a dead body could speak the truth. But before we get to the corpse, we need to understand the stakes. It's early 1943. The Allies have just clawed their way across North Africa, and now they're staring across the sea at southern Europe. It's time to strike the continent. But where? Strategically, the answer is obvious. Sicily, a stepping stone into Italy, a dagger pointed straight at the soft underbelly of Nazi-occupied Europe. But that obviousness? That's a problem, because if the Allies knew it, so did the Germans. Any invasion of Sicily would face brutal resistance, unless the Germans could be convinced to look elsewhere. And that's where the story begins to twist. You see, this wasn't a battlefield problem. It was an intelligence problem. German intelligence at the time wasn't sloppy. In fact, it was sharp, disciplined, and effective. They'd sniff out anything half-baked. So if the Allies were going to mislead them, they couldn't just fake it. They had to seduce them. The deception had to be intricate, plausible, believable at every level. Because this wasn't just about tricking a general or throwing out a red herring. This was about rewiring an enemy's entire perception of reality, about bending their logic in exactly the direction you want them to go. And that takes more than a good plan. It takes psychological warfare with a human face. So how did they do it? Let's move on to the architecture of the deception. So, how do you convince the Nazis that you're going one direction when you're very much going another? You don't just tell a lie, you build a world around that lie. You make it so rich, so detailed, so perfectly tailored to your enemy's psychology that they convince themselves it's true. This is where Operation Barclay comes in. Barclay wasn't just a plan, it was a framework for illusion. Its goal? To make the Germans believe that the Allies were about to invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. Barclay was broad. It included fake troop build-ups, misleading radio chatter, even phony diplomatic messages. It cast a wide shadow over the Mediterranean. But buried within Barclay was something smaller, stranger, bolder. That something was Operation Mincemeat. Where Barclay dealt in abstract signals, Mincemeat dealt in flesh and blood, quite literally. The plan was simple on the surface, yet absolutely wild in execution. Take a dead body, dress it up as a British officer, plant fake invasion documents on it, and let it wash ashore where Axis forces would find it. But here's the key. It wasn't enough to just drop a body with papers. No. This corpse needed a life, a backstory, a girlfriend, a wallet with movie tickets, a photograph in his pocket, love letters, receipts, every detail designed to scream this is a real man with a real history. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. British intelligence didn't just think tactically, they thought psychologically. They studied how Nazi intelligence officers thought, how they feared failure, how their chain of command stifled dissent. They knew the Germans were less likely to question information if it came from what looked like an accidental, emotionally charged discovery, especially if it confirmed what they already wanted to believe. In other words, the British weren't just creating a story, they were hacking an entire belief system. And soon, that story would take shape in the form of a corpse with a name. Let's talk about how that body came to be. Alright, let's get into the heart of the deception, quite literally. Meet Major William Martin, Royal Marine, trusted courier, man of duty, beloved fiancé, except he never existed. Major Martin was a complete fabrication, stitched together from fiction, forged documents, and the body of a homeless man who had died from ingesting rat poison. Grim? Absolutely. But in the eyes of British intelligence, he was perfect. They took this anonymous corpse and transformed it into a believable officer. Every detail mattered. He was given a uniform, a wallet with coins, a photograph of his made-up sweetheart named Pam, and even love letters and old ticket stubs. They added official-looking receipts, identity papers, military credentials, and the pièce de résistance, a locked briefcase containing top-secret invasion plans. But those plans? Completely fake. They hinted that the Allies were gearing up for an invasion of Greece, not Sicily, and they were crafted to appear urgent, authentic, and disastrously real if intercepted. Now, planting the body wasn't enough. The release had to be choreographed like theatre. British submarines quietly delivered Major Martin's body off the coast of Spain, near the town of Huelva. Why there? Because Spanish officials in that region had a known sympathy for the Axis powers, especially for German intelligence. It was a calculated bet. If the body washed up, the Spanish authorities would find it, snoop through the briefcase, and most importantly, share what they found with the Nazis. And that's exactly what happened. So now, we have a dead man with a made-up life, planted like a seed off a foreign shore, carrying lies designed to save thousands of lives. But here's the real genius. This wasn't just about documents or drama. It worked because the Nazis wanted to believe it. And that tells us something powerful about the enemy's system. Let's take a closer look at why Nazi intelligence fell for it. So here's the million-dollar question. How did the Nazis fall for it? They weren't fools. They had a massive intelligence network. So why did they accept the bait, a corpse with a briefcase, as gospel truth? To answer that, we have to look under the hood of their system. And what we find is a machine built on hierarchy, fear, and inflexibility. First, let's talk about top-down validation culture. In the Nazi intelligence apparatus, decisions weren't made through debate or open analysis. They were made by deferring to authority. Orders came from the top. Doubt was dangerous. So if someone higher up believed a report, questioning it wasn't just inconvenient, it was politically suicidal. And that brings us to Hitler. He had a pet theory. He believed the Balkans were the likely target of Allied invasion. So when this conveniently dead British officer appeared with documents confirming that exact belief, well, that wasn't suspicious. That was validation. It felt like proof. And once Hitler accepted it, his underlings followed suit. No dissent, no critical thinking, just a cascade of confirmation bias echoing down the chain of command. And there's one more layer to this dysfunction: rigid planning. The German war machine was centralized to a fault. Their strategies depended on tight coordination and fixed timelines. That made them powerful, but also brittle, because once a plan was in motion, it was hard to adapt. Even if some officers had suspicions, even if there were intelligence fragments suggesting Sicily, the machine wasn't designed to pivot. So here's what we're left with: an authoritarian structure, a leader convinced of a theory, and a rigid system too clumsy to reassess in time. Operation Mincemeat didn't just deceive individuals. It exploited a system that couldn't change course, even when its survival depended on it. So what happened when the bait was taken? Let's see how this elaborate deception played out on the battlefield. Alright, the stage was set, the bait was swallowed, and the gears of war began to turn. So, what actually happened? In short, it worked. The Germans shifted their forces, they reinforced Greece, they fortified Sardinia, and most crucially, they pulled troops and tanks away from Sicily, the real target. Let that sink in. A single fake identity, a drowned man with forged documents, and it changed where an empire moved its armies. When the Allies finally launched their invasion of Sicily in July 1943, they met resistance, sure, but not the kind they were bracing for. The German defenses were thinner, the Italian forces were scattered and demoralized. And the result? A much faster and less costly campaign than military planners had feared. It wasn't just a tactical win, it was a strategic breakthrough, because taking Sicily opened the door to mainland Italy. And once Italy fell, Hitler's southern flank became exposed, forcing him to divert even more troops and resources away from the Eastern Front and Normandy. Operation Mincemeat didn't win the war on its own, but it bent the arc of the war. It reshaped the battlefield before a single Allied soldier stepped on shore. And that's the power of information. Or, in this case, misinformation. Because the most expensive campaigns aren't always fought with bombs or bullets. Sometimes, the sharpest weapon is a believable lie, whispered into the ear of an enemy who's already half convinced. But that leads us to a deeper question. What does this teach us? Not just about war, but about systems of power. Let's pull back and examine the bigger picture. So, what does this all really tell us? Sure, it's a wild story about spies, submarines, and secret documents tucked into the jacket of a dead man. But beneath the drama lies a deeper truth. Operation Mincemeat wasn't just a clever trick. It was a stress test for systems of power, and what it revealed was a lot. Let's start with rigidity. The Nazi command structure was centralized, authoritarian, and deeply invested in hierarchy. It didn't reward flexibility. It punished dissent. It functioned like a machine, strong when running smoothly, but vulnerable when something jammed the gears. Mincemeat jammed those gears. By feeding the system exactly what it wanted to hear, the British weaponized its inflexibility. They didn't need to convince every German officer, just enough of the right ones. And once the belief took hold at the top, the rest of the system fell in line. Now, contrast that with how the operation was created. The British team that designed Mincemeat was small, nimble, and empowered to think creatively. They weren't burdened by layers of approval or political dogma. They were allowed to imagine the impossible, and then quietly make it real. That's not just a difference in tactics. That's a difference in systems. Centralized power often prides itself on control, but that same control can blind it. It's slow to adapt, easy to manipulate, vulnerable to its own echo chamber. Decentralized thinking, on the other hand, thrives on unpredictability. It allows for dissent. It tolerates strange ideas, even fake love letters written to a dead man. And sometimes, that's what wins wars. So the real lesson of Operation Mincemeat isn't just about fooling the enemy. It's about understanding how belief moves through systems, and how the most rigid structures are often the easiest to break from within. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing we need to consider. Because as impressive as this operation was, it wasn't without ethical weight. Let's talk about that. So now we know how it worked. We know the corpse was planted, the lie was believed, and the soldiers landed in Sicily with far fewer bullets flying their way. But before we shut the book on this story, let's ask something harder. Was it right? We often celebrate deception in war when it saves lives. And in this case, it did. There's no doubt Operation Mincemeat spared countless Allied troops from a bloodbath on Sicilian beaches. But the truth is, this was still a manipulation. It used a real human body, a man who had died alone, his name erased and replaced for strategic gain. He didn't choose to serve. He became a weapon without knowing it. And that raises a deeper question, not just about war, but about our modern world. Today, we live in an age where information is a battlefield. Misinformation spreads faster than ever. Entire nations are nudged, shaped, or polarized by stories that may not be true, but feel true. Sometimes that manipulation comes from foreign enemies, and sometimes it's homegrown. Operation Mincemeat is a reminder that deception works best when it plays on what we want to believe. That's true in war, it's true in politics, and it's true on every screen we stare into. So what's the takeaway? Truth is powerful, but so is illusion, and in a world built on systems, whether military, political, or digital, understanding how belief travels is just as important as understanding the facts themselves. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and make sure to subscribe for more deep dives like this one. And if you want to hear the podcast version of this episode, check the link in the description below. I post new episodes every day. And hey, if you like your history told with clarity, curiosity, and a little bit of edge, you're in the right place. Check out the other videos on the channel. There's always more to uncover in the truth behind history.